Every year, as winter deepens and the days grow shorter, people all over the world begin to wait. They wait for light, for warmth, for meaning. The end of the year carries a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. Some look back with regret. Others look forward with expectation. But beneath the celebrations and decorations, there is an ancient human longing, the desire for mercy, for generosity, for someone who gives without demanding anything in return. Long before legends and modern traditions reshaped his image, there lived a real man who embodied this longing. Not a myth, not a character, but a bishop who walked among the poor, defended the forgotten, and gave in silence. His name was Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, and his life unfolded during one of the most difficult and decisive periods of early Christian history. Nicholas was born around the end of the 3rd century, likely between 270 and 280 AD, in the city of Patara, in the region of Lycia, located in what is now southern Turkey. At the time, Lycia was part of the Roman Empire. The Roman world of Nicholas' youth was unstable. Political power shifted constantly, and imperial authority was enforced through military strength. Christianity, though spreading rapidly, remained illegal for much of this period. Christians lived under the threat of persecution. At times tolerated, at other times brutally suppressed, they gathered quietly in homes, caves, and hidden assemblies. Faith was not cultural, it was costly. Patara itself was a port city. Ships arrived from across the Mediterranean, carrying grain, wine, soldiers, merchants, and ideas. Nicholas grew up in a world shaped by movement, trade, and uncertainty. According to early tradition, Nicholas was born into a Christian family of means. This detail is important because it explains how he later used wealth, not for status, but for mercy. From a young age, Nicholas was known for discipline and seriousness. Ancient sources describe him as unusually attentive to prayer and fasting, even as a child. While such descriptions follow hagiographic style, they point to an early reputation for restraint. Education in Roman Lycia included rhetoric, basic philosophy, and moral instruction. Nicholas would have been trained to speak clearly, reason logically, and understand civic responsibility. These skills later shaped his pastoral authority. The Church Fathers often emphasized that holiness is formed gradually. In Nicholas' case, early habits of self-control, generosity, and prayer created a foundation that would later support much heavier responsibilities. When his parents died, likely during a regional epidemic, Nicholas inherited considerable wealth. This moment became one of the defining turning points of his life. In Roman society, inheritance was meant to secure social advancement. Land, gold, and property were tools for status and influence. Nicholas chose a different path. Inspired by the gospel command to give to the poor, he began distributing his wealth secretly. He did not seek recognition, gratitude, or authority. What mattered was that suffering was relieved. This pattern of hidden generosity became central to his identity. Unlike public benefactors who engraved their names on buildings, Nicholas gave in silence, protecting both the dignity of the poor and the purity of his intention. These actions were not isolated gestures. They reflected a worldview shaped by Christ's teaching that what is done in secret is seen by God. One of the earliest and most widespread traditions about Nicholas concerns a poor man with 3 daughters. Unable to provide dowries, the father feared their future would be marked by exploitation and shame. Hearing of their situation, Nicholas acted quietly. Under cover of night, he threw a bag of gold through the family's window, enough for a dowry. He repeated this act again and again without revealing himself. This story is preserved in early Christian tradition and reflects Nicholas' consistent reputation for discreet charity. While exact details cannot be historically verified, the Church has long accepted the account as expressive of his character. Importantly, the focus of the story is not romance or celebration, but protection of human dignity. Nicholas intervened where society failed. As Christianity continued to spread through Lycia, the church in the city of Myra faced the challenge of leadership. Bishops at that time were not administrators in comfort, but shepherds in danger. To lead was to risk imprisonment or death. According to ancient ecclesiastical tradition, the bishops of the region gathered to elect a new bishop for Myra. Unable to reach agreement, they turned to prayer and fasting, asking God to reveal his choice. Tradition holds that they were instructed to choose the first priest to enter the church the next morning. That man was Nicholas. Reluctant and unassuming, he accepted the role not as honor, but as obedience. This moment marked a profound shift in his life. Nicholas moved from hidden generosity to public responsibility, from anonymity to visible pastoral care. As bishop, Nicholas became responsible not only for spiritual teaching, but for the welfare of an entire Christian community. He cared for widows, orphans, prisoners, sailors, and the poor. The bishop was often the only defender the vulnerable had. This period coincided with the Great Persecution under Emperor Diocletian and later Galerius. Churches were destroyed, scriptures burned, and clergy imprisoned. The Christian faith faced one of its darkest trials. Nicholas did not abandon his flock. Sources indicate that he was arrested and imprisoned for his faith. He endured harsh conditions, deprivation, and humiliation, sharing the suffering of countless other Christians. Imprisonment marked Nicholas deeply. It strengthened his compassion for the oppressed and sharpened his understanding of injustice. Faith, for him, was no abstraction. It was forged in suffering. With the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, Christianity was legalized. Persecution ended, but a new challenge emerged: how to live the gospel faithfully when suffering was no longer imposed from outside. As bishop, Nicholas now faced internal struggles, disputes, moral failures, and theological confusion. The church was free, but not yet unified. Leadership required wisdom, firmness, and mercy. Nicholas became known as a bishop of justice. He intervened in cases of corruption, defended those falsely accused, and confronted abuses of power. His authority was moral, not political. Several traditions describe Nicholas rescuing innocent men condemned to death by corrupt officials. In one account, he appeared suddenly at the execution site and halted the sword with his own hands. Whether understood literally or symbolically, these accounts reflect how he was remembered, as a man who stood between injustice and its victims. Nicholas' courage made him respected and feared by unjust authorities. He did not seek confrontation, but he did not retreat when truth demanded action. Living in a coastal region, Nicholas became closely associated with sailors and travelers. The sea was both livelihood and danger. Storms were frequent, and shipwrecks common. Ancient accounts speak of Nicholas appearing in times of maritime crisis, calming storms and guiding ships to safety. Such stories spread rapidly among seafaring communities across the Mediterranean. These accounts contributed to his widespread veneration. Ports, harbors, and coastal cities adopted him as protector. His cult spread not by imperial decree, but by lived experience and gratitude. The 4th century was a time of intense theological debate. Questions about Christ's nature divided bishops, cities, and entire regions. Unity was fragile. Nicholas lived during the rise of Arianism, a teaching that denied the full divinity of Christ. This controversy threatened the core of Christian belief. Though not a prolific writer, Nicholas was remembered as a firm defender of the faith handed down from the apostles. His concern was pastoral. False teaching harmed ordinary believers. By the early 4th century, the church faced a challenge more dangerous than persecution. It was no longer attacked from outside, but divided from within. The teaching of Arius spread rapidly, claiming that Christ was not fully divine, but a created being. This debate threatened the very foundation of Christianity. If Christ were not truly God, salvation itself would lose its meaning. The unity of the church was at stake, and confusion reached every level of society. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea. Bishops from across the Christian world gathered to clarify the faith once and for all. Nicholas of Myra was among them. Nicholas was not a philosopher like Athanasius, nor a prolific writer. His authority came from lived faith, pastoral experience, and suffering endured for Christ. He represented the voice of the faithful shepherd. Nicholas stood firmly with the Nicene Confession. Christ is true God from true God. The Nicene Creed emerged from this council, becoming the foundation of Christian belief. Nicholas returned to Myra, carrying not only doctrinal clarity, but renewed responsibility to guard his flock from error. After Nicaea, Nicholas continued his pastoral work quietly. There were no triumphal parades, no monuments, no political reward. The work of a bishop resumed in daily acts of care, teaching, and prayer. He mediated disputes, reconciled divided families, and ensured that the poor were not forgotten in times of growing prosperity. The end of persecution did not end suffering. Injustice simply took new forms. Nicholas remained especially attentive to those without voice or influence. His reputation as a defender of the innocent continued to grow, not through public spectacle, but through consistent action. In this period, his earlier acts of hidden generosity became known only gradually. People did not admire him because he gave, but because he gave without seeking recognition. This quiet consistency defined his sanctity. Nicholas died peacefully, likely around the middle of the 4th century. The exact date is uncertain, but the memory of his life was firmly planted in the Church of Lycia. Almost immediately, he was venerated as a saint. Pilgrims visited his tomb, and stories of intercession began to circulate among sailors, merchants, and the poor. This was not state-sponsored devotion. It arose naturally from lived experience. His reputation spread across the Mediterranean world. By the 6th century, churches dedicated to Nicholas existed in Constantinople, Greece, and Italy. His name crossed linguistic and cultural boundaries. Over centuries, the figure of Nicholas began to change. As his cult spread into Western Europe, stories adapted to local cultures and customs. Gradually, the historical bishop became a symbol. Generosity, secrecy, and care for children remained central themes, but theological depth and pastoral authority faded from popular memory. The saint was simplified into a seasonal figure. This transformation says more about the world than about Nicholas himself. Societies remember what they find comforting and forget what demands responsibility. Yet beneath the layers of folklore, the original figure remains. Nicholas was not defined by winter celebrations or gifts. He was defined by attentiveness to suffering, courage under pressure, and faithfulness in ordinary days. His life reminds us that true generosity is quiet. It protects dignity. It expects nothing in return. At the end of the year, when people measure success and failure, Nicholas offers a different standard. Not how much was gained, but how much was given. Not how loudly one was praised, but how faithfully one served. Saint Nicholas of Myra lived in a world marked by fear, injustice, and uncertainty. He responded not with withdrawal, but with mercy rooted in truth. His story endures because it touches something universal, the longing for goodness that does not demand applause, for authority that protects rather than dominates. If this documentary helped you see beyond the legend and encounter the real saint, consider subscribing. Here, we explore the lives of the saints with historical care and spiritual depth. You are welcome to return.